The father recognized his son's conviction over his character. In other words, it was the son's bad character that led to his belief in his conviction. And I believe I'm speaking to somebody in the building that it is the result of you being in the far country, away from your father's house, engaging in situations that involved bad character, that it was the bad character that brought you back. But in the bad character, that's when you discovered a belief in your convictions that it was better at my father's house than when I left. Have I got somebody walking with me?
If you've been searching for something different, time to elevate your spirit, elevate your mindset with Mount Corinth Church. Contemporary, creative, cutting edge with Pastor Allen. Christ-centered, Bible-based, prayer-minded. Experience joy for the journey. Prepare yourself as Pastor Allen challenges you to think bigger. Now, get ready to launch your faith and spirit to another level.
Can I just park here parenthetically and just try to preach to somebody in the building? If you have a spirit of anger today against any brother or sister, today's the day to cut it off. Life is too short to hold a grudge or grumble about another brother or sister. Oh, I wish I could help somebody today. Well, there are 4 things in the text, and we'll be done because I know you've got brunch on your mind. Here it is. Here's what he did. The first thing the father did in the text so that he could dance with his prodigal son again is he showed him compassion. Can somebody say compassion? Yeah, look at verse 20. It says, so he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran to him and embraced him and kissed him. He felt compassion. And this is why the father felt compassion. Watch this. Because the father recognized, watch this, conviction over character. And see, you just missed your shout because you think we're talking about this prodigal, but I'm talking about us today. The reason why you have the ability to dance with your father in his house today is because as it is concerning you and myself, he looked over, please listen, he looked over our character and he sees our conviction. Okay, now y'all add it because now I got to go back in the previous verses. Look at verse 17. When he came to his senses, this is the prodigal, while he's in the far country, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? But I'm dying out here in the far country with hunger. I know what I'll do. He's thinking to himself, I will get up from this far country. I will go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. The father recognized his son's conviction over his character. In other words, it was the son's bad character that led to his belief in his conviction. And I believe I'm speaking to somebody in the building that it is the result of you being in the far country, away from your father's house, engaging in situations that involved bad character, that it was the bad character that brought you back. But in the bad character, that's when you discovered a belief in your convictions that it was better at my father's house than when I left. Have I got somebody walking with me? So what was he convicted of? Was right here in verse 18. There are 3 things in 18 and 19. The first one is he was convicted physically. Look at it. He says, I will get up and I will go to my father. He's in the pen with pigs who were feeding off of pods. And at that time, he said he was so hungry, he would be willing to eat the pods that the pigs were eating, and he was Jewish. He shouldn't have been anywhere near the pen or the pigs. But when we stray from the Father's voice, it'll take us to places we didn't want to go. But when he came to himself with his conviction, he said, I got a physical conviction. I want to get back to where I belong. So I'll go to my Father. But then he says, I will say to him, Father, I have sinned. Not only is it a physical conviction in the A section of 18, it's a spiritual conviction in the B section of 18. The spiritual conviction is he said, I will go back to my Father and I'll say to my Father, I have sinned. When was the last time you came back to your Father's house after being in the far country on the outside and came back here and came down and said, Father, I have. It takes conviction. But then look, there's another one in verse 19. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. The A section in 18 was a physical conviction. The B section in 18 was a spiritual conviction. But then 19 shows us the vocational conviction. He's a son, and when he was at the Father's house, everything he had was free. Then he got the inheritance that he should not have gotten when he got it, because you know historically, biblically, the inheritance came at the point in time when your father passed. And then when the father passed, the inheritance went to the oldest child and then the next in line. Well, he skipped that order and got ahead of his brother, and then he skipped the order of death because his father is still alive, and he said, I want my inheritance now. He had an attitude that was magnitude, but the attitude of magnitude changed when he lost everything, and then the attitude of magnitude became an attitude of gratitude, who said, I'll go back to my house where it was free, and I'll be a son on a salary. I need somebody to walk with me. It's all because he had a conviction. Can somebody say a conviction? And that's all because of the consciousness that's found in this story. See, it was a coincidence with the lost sheep. It was carelessness with the lost coin, but it was conscience with the prodigal son. Thank you. Since it's Father's Day, I'll just borrow from A. Lewis Patterson Jr. Conscience, con means with. Science means to know, based upon facts of an experiment of something to be true. The prodigal found science out in the far country when he wasted all of his wealth with loose living, ending up in a hog pen, and then that's where he discovered his science. That's where he learned through experimentation that this is not the place to be. So through the science of the hog pen came the con, the with. He put that with what he knew at his father's house and said, it's better back there. I think I'm going home. Am I speaking to anybody in the building who your conscience came a part of your conscience? Your C-O-N-S-C-I-O-U-S. Because see, that word means, watch this, awareness. And see, sometimes he's got to put us in certain places that we never thought we would be in order for us to have the awareness that it was better where I came from. And it's the awareness of our conscience that leads to our conscience that it's time to change. Through this act, the father, look at the text in verse 20. The son gets up out the pig pen, headed back home. But while he's still a far way off, the father saw him. The father felt compassion for him. The father ran to him. The father embraced him, and the father kissed him. The father had compassion for him because he did not look at his character any longer. Now he looked at his what? His conviction. And see, our convictions have the power to change our circumstances. And I'm trying to help somebody in the building. When was the last time you've been convicted? That may be why things have not changed. I'll keep walking. Because not only did he have compassion, secondly, he had courage. Can somebody say courage? The father had courage because, watch this, he responded to cooperation over competition.
Good afternoon, and I have the extreme honor to stand here with
Melba Patterson, Pastor Alan Lamar's mom.
Okay. And Mom, in this first year, I know this has been a huge shift for your family. To see this ministry, this legacy now continue with your son, how important has that been for your family?
It's been very important. I've been here with my husband, A. Lewis Patterson Jr., for 44 years. And of course, in April the 9th of 2014, he passed. And then the church called my son, 95%. It was awesome. And he's just been doing a great job. I'm really proud of him, but I've always been proud of my children, and he is one of them. It's just that I'm just so glad that God has chose to place him here and follow in his father's footsteps. He has not changed anything. The church has grown so much more. If people could just see what's going on here at Corinth, I mean, the children's church and all, and it's just a lot of joy here. And he said, think big, and that's what we're doing here at Corinth. We're thinking big.
Look at verse 21 through 22. And the son said to him, this is the prodigal, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. But wait a minute. Look at verse 28. But he, the older brother, became angry and was not willing to go in to the celebration. And the father came out and began pleading with the older brother. But he answered and said, Father, look, for many years I've been serving you and have never neglected a command of yours. Now he's lying. And yet you have never given me a young goat. He's lying. He's been eating every day in his father's house, every month for years and decades, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, lying, that's your brother of yours, when he devoured your wealth with prostitutes, now he's really lying. Y'all, they didn't have text messaging. They didn't have cell phones. He didn't know what his younger brother was doing in the far country. But here's what happened. He's thinking in his mind what he would have done with that wealth if he was in the far country. And if he was in the far country, he would have been at V Live making it rain while they drop it like this. So he tells on himself of what he would have done. And my Bible says, if you think it though you didn't do it, you've already. But here's what I like about the Father. Here's what I like about the Father. What I like about the Father is his courage. Do you know what the problem is today with many families? There's no more courage with the fathers. Now this is true with the mothers too, but today is Father's Day. See, we allow the children to run the crib. So some of us as fathers, when the older brother said, I'm not coming in because you're doing all this for him, there are some fathers who would have changed and not had the courage to remain with what they said. So they would have took away from the younger son what he already said he would give him, and then that would do nothing but hurt the whole family. This father had the courage to tell his older child, you don't tell me what to do. This is my house. And if I want to give the younger son what he has, you shouldn't be worried about it. And the reason why you shouldn't be worried about it is because everything you have, you didn't deserve your own self. Am I speaking to anybody in the building who knows you've got some older brothers or sisters that may have more than you? Well, you ought to be all right. Because everything God has given you is what you need. And he may not give us everything we want, but he will give us everything we need. Somebody say courage. He had courage. Yeah. Look at this. But the father in verse 22 said to his slaves, quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him. And quickly put a ring on his hand. And quickly put sandals on his feet. Now mind you, he's not even home yet. They getting the celebration ready. He's still afar off. But he's still afar off, but you can't forget where he came from. He came from the pig pen. He was deep in the slop. He's smelling. You ought to see how he looks. He's wet from the slop. He's coming back with no shoes on his feet. Barely any clothes, torn and raggedy. He looks like he's been in the slop. So the father says, before he gets back into the house, go get a robe. But don't get any robe. Bring the best robe and put them on him in the far country. Put the ring on him and put the shoes on him. Why did he say go get the robe and put it on the son while he was still out in the far country, while he was still dripping wet from getting out the pig pen? Here it is. Because he didn't want everybody in the house to see everything he'd been through. Am I speaking to anybody in the building who's thankful that your father covered you before you came back to his house? So everybody didn't have to see everything you've been through. Oh, if everybody knew everything everybody had been through, everybody would keep their mouths shut. Don't start tripping on folk when you start to see something that you haven't done, when you know you got skeletons in your closet. If your father says bring out the best robe, you ought to start celebrating. The fact that he didn't disrobe me is enough. I feel like preaching right now. Is there anybody in the building that's glad he covered you? Not only did he cover his condition with the robe, but he reestablished the relationship with the ring. That's why you gotta know when you gotta put a ring on it. That ring establishes a relationship. And when people see that ring, then they know you're connected to somebody. So he said, reestablish the relationship with the ring. And then they said, while you're out there, put some shoes on him. Why? Because he didn't have no shoes. So the shoes were to strengthen his steps on his way back home. Am I speaking to anybody in the building that is glad that God has given you some shoes? I'm not talking about physical shoes. I'm talking about some spiritual shoes. Like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those shoes fit well. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, those shoes fit well. Am I speaking to anybody who's been strengthened by the shoe? Here it is. Compassion, somebody say compassion. Courage, somebody say courage. Yeah, the prodigal danced with his father also because of commitment. Can somebody say commitment? Look at verse 32. But we had to celebrate, the father said. He's talking to the older brother. And rejoice. For this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, was lost and has been found. He had commitment, y'all. Because this isn't the first time he says it. This is verse 32. This is the end. But verse 24, listen to it. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost, but has been found. And this is a reason the father said to celebrate. Oh, y'all missing this. Because you can't comprehend the commitment the father had. Maybe it was too far long ago that you were dead. Maybe it was too far long ago that you were lost. But the text says twice, this son of mine was dead and come to life, verse 24. Again, he was lost and has been found, 32. Your brother was dead and has begun to live. He was lost and has been found. The father was committed in spite of his circumstance. And see, somebody missed your shout because you haven't really contemplated how committed the father has been in spite of our own unfaithfulness to him. You ought to be glad that when you was dead, he brought you back to life. You ought to be glad that when you was lost, he found you. And if you can't celebrate on that, there's nothing else you can really celebrate on. But when I look back over my life and realize how far I've been, realize how much I've spent, and realize how long it took me to come back, I can't do nothing but give him praise at the fact that he gave me life again. I can't do anything but give him praise at the fact that he found me when I was.
So I'm here with brothers and sisters, right? And your names are?
Elias.
And Elise.
Okay, Elias and Elise, correct? Okay. How long have you guys been here at Mount Corinth?
Since birth, which would be 16 years.
15 years.
Wonderful. So Pastor Allen is now your pastor, right? And what do you like about his ministry?
I like how he's cutting edge and he relates more to the youth and he's trying to promote the youth.
Yeah, he really promotes the youth. He's has a little bit of swag on it.
Okay. So your generation's really being plugged with a whole lot of things. What specifically maybe has Pastor Allen said in this first year that's maybe kept you from making a bad decision or going down the wrong path as you deal with peer pressure and those types of things at school?
Well, when he added this youth ministry over here, it's really helped me interact with God more. It just helps me a lot.
Gave you kind of like a place to be, like your own place. What about you?
I think he teaches me to make my own decisions based on the biblical preachings that he teaches. So, and not coming into peer pressure and doing what everybody else is doing.
Okay, so the Bible's not boring anymore under Pastor Allen's ministry, right? Okay, so in one word, describe Pastor Allen.
Exhilarating.
Cool.
Cool. All right, well, we've heard he's cool.
Commitment. But look at this. This commitment is connected. See, remember the conscience with science to know. His conscience was when he put everything together that he'd been through. And with everything together, he knew it could never get any better than his Father's house. Yeah, when his conscience is there, it's like a connection. That word con. And connect means to join together. It was the consensus 8 years ago of the majority that we put Barack in. People joined together and put him in office. It's a conclusion with conclusion. It's an intro, it's a body, and it's an ending. When he put everything in conclusion, he came to a consensus within himself and said, I got to connect myself back to my Father's house. And see, whenever that happens, there's some things that ought to be happening at the Father's house. And this was the picture he was trying to paint, like Picasso for the Pharisees and the scribes. Look at verse 7. I tell you in the same way that there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous. He's trying to get them to see, get rid of your anger and start anticipating some joy. Look at verse 10. In the same way, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. He's trying to get them to see through the one coin versus the 9 what they ought to be really rejoicing about. But it's really not about the lost sheep. It's really not about the lost coin. It's really about the son who was the prodigal and the older son who in verse 28 became angry instead of rejoicing. I want to ask you today, when you see God working through people, and when you see them coming through these doors, and when you see them receiving him as their Lord and Savior, do you sit in judgment or do you sit in joy? And the reason why you ought to sit in joy is because once upon a time, that was you. You haven't always been a Pharisee. You haven't always been a scribe. You've been a tax collector. And you've been a sinner too. In fact, you are a sinner today. We are all sinners today. We just don't sin as much as yesterday.
Hello, Houston. This is Pastor Allen, and this is my beautiful wife, Deidre. And we want to invite you out to one of our electrifying services at 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. each and every Sunday. We're establishing ministry on an electrifying level. We're contemporary, creative, and cutting-edge church. Also, log on to our website at www.mountcorinth.com for more information.
We hope to see you soon.
You've been watching Mount Corinth Church with Pastor Allen. We hope that you've enjoyed the message today. Make sure you come out and join us for one of our electrifying services at 8 or 10 a.m. 4901 Providence Street in Houston, Texas. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Mount Corinth or log on to mountcorinth.com. Tune in next time as we continue to find more joy for the journey.